Hi, it's Dawn from Ninja Bunny Crochet. Today I have for you my review of the Sentro Knitting Machine and the Addi Knitting Machine. Now I like both of these machines. They both have good things and not so good things about them, but for the most part I like them both. Now, circular knitting, these are circular knitting machines. So a circular knitting machine is a fixed gauge machine. And that means the space between the teeth, or the pins, or needles, whatever you want to call them, are at a fixed intervals. They can't be changed. So imagine it this way, that you have one pair of knitting needles or one crochet hook for every project that you do. And that's what it is with a circular knitting machine. It doesn't mean that you can't do multiple projects or different types of projects. It just means that the gauge will be the same for each of the projects. Now you can tweak it a little bit with your tension, but depending on the yarn, you want to make sure that you have the right tension for that particular yarn. Otherwise your machine is going to drop stitches or tuck stitches, and then that creates a different problem that you have to fix. Or you end up frogging out your entire project and starting over again, which is no fun, and believe me, I've done that. So both of these machines do tubular knitting and panel knitting, and the stitch that they do is called a stockinette stitch. I'm sure any of you out there that do hand knitting know what that stitch looks like. It's the little V stitch. I'm not a knitter, so that's what that stitch is called. They work best with a DK weight or up to a worsted weight. Now some people have reviewed these machines and said they could do a bulky weight, some bulky weight yarns. I have not tried a bulky weight yarn. It's not recommended by the manufacturer, and you could possibly break your machine, so I have not tried bulky weight yarns. So I would not want to damage my machine. So some of the different features that these machines have. The Sentro Knitting Machine, this one right here, this pink one, has, get it in the screen there, this has 48 pins going around. And when you crank your machine, if I can do this right, you'll be able to see it. There should be one white pin. All the pins are the pink. Let me see if I can get the white pin up. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay, there is the white pin. That signifies the start and the end of the row. Now the pins are numbered, but they are kind of hard to see the numbers. So what I did is I put some, I don't know if you can see it in the camera here, I put black Sharpie marker around the white pin so that when it's going around, I can see when the round is starting, when the new round is coming up. It does have a counter on it. Get that in the camera. I'm still trying to get that. If you can see the counter on the side there. You just push the button to reset the counter. You just push this button on the top and it resets the counter. It has this tension guide right here. There's 3 different settings on it. Get that in there. So you have 3 different tensions. It has a tighter tension, a medium, and a looser tension depending on the yarn that you're using. And it's kind of trial and error because I like to hold my yarn as I'm cranking too, so that helps also to tension the yarn. So it's really, you have to try and see what works for you. I usually start with the medium tension. Some of the thinner yarns you might want to go with the tighter tension, like go for the DK weight, but for a worsted weight, if it's like a Red Heart Super Saver, I'm going to go with the medium tension. If it's a little bit thicker weight, like possibly a like a Karen 1-pounder or a sweet roll, That can be a tricky yarn on the Sentro, definitely. You want to go with the looser tension because it's a slightly thicker yarn. Now, the way you affix your Sentro to the table is with little suction cups. Now, I'm going to show you the stuff that comes with the Sentro. Now, you get a few balls of yarn, which is nice, but I mean, it's here nor there. I mean, the yarn it's okay. It's just, you know, your standard acrylic yarn. It's really nothing to write home about. I don't really think there's enough here to actually make a project, but it would be nice if you're using it for waste yarn. Because some projects will call that you put a few rounds of waste yarn on before you start knitting your chosen color, and then you put a few rounds on afterwards too. You also get an instruction pamphlet, and then you get these little suction cups here that you affix to the bottoms of your feet. They just there's a little notch and they slide in. Well, they're very hard to put in. You got to really work them in there to get those suction cups in. And they will stick to nice smooth surfaces like a glass tabletop or a granite countertop, which I don't have either one of those in my craft room. I have wood tops and I have a plastic top table, so I came up with a different solution of how to get my Sentro to stick down to the table. If you can see the bottom of those feet, I put Velcro on there. And then the opposite side of the Velcro, the fuzzy part, this is the sticky part, or the textured part, and the fuzzy part is on top of my table over here. And I just my machine down to the table, because making sure that your machine is secure is very important, because you don't want your machine wobbling around, and otherwise you're hanging on the leg while you're cranking, and these legs are not very they're kind of flimsy, so you don't want to break your leg off. And speaking of the legs, you do have to screw those legs on when you first get your machine, and they give you a handy dandy screwdriver, which is a magnetic screwdriver, so you can just pick up your screws and screw them down. Very nice. You also get a few other tools with it. You get 3 yarn needles. You get a very long yarn needle. Pretty long. I don't know if you can see that in the camera. Just see how long that is. It's longer than my hand. So you get a very long yarn needle. See if you can see, actually probably see it up against that scarf in the background there. And then you get a medium size yarn needle and a bent tip one. Go over here. You can see that bent tip. Let me get it in there. See, it's got a little tip that goes up. This is really good for when you're taking your stitches off the machine. And then they give you this little crochet hook. This is good if you drop stitches or you have to fix a tuck stitch. So you will use that crochet hook, or if you're going to use, you can use this crochet hook for when you want to bind off and you want to make a crochet edge. You could use this hook, or you could just use one of your hooks that you have in your collection. So that is what you get with your Sentro. And I'm going to grab these yarns and put them back in here. And the directions. So you get some nifty little gadgets with that. And with your Sentro, you have this yarn guide right here. This helps keep your tension. After you thread your machine, the yarn goes through this yarn holder, and then you put it into the tension guide. You have your switch here for tubular, which is a T, and the P for the panel knit. Panel knit means that the machine will only crank so far to the white pin, and then you have to crank it back the other way. And that makes flat panels. I set it on my Velcro there. Now, the Addi, you don't get as many toys with the Addi, but the Addi is a much more solid machine, and it's heavier, it's more professional. And this is the Addi. This has white pins, and then your pins that signify the row, the new row, are black, and you have 3 of those. So if you can see the 3 pins, they're kind of hard to see. There's 3 of them right here. 1, 2, and 1 down here is 3. You have your row counter right here, and this is your yarn gauge. So you just slide this out, slip the yarn in. Now there is it does hold the yarn, so there's some tension there, but you do have to hold your yarn while you're working the Addi, so you do hand tension it. It takes a little bit of practice to do that. You get your yarn needle, which is a little bent tip needle, and there's a little spot right here to hold your yarn needle. Your legs screw onto your machine. To hold your machine down to the table, you get clamps. And these clamps work fantastic. Now, you can buy clamps on Etsy for the Sentro, or you can use C-clamps as well. That's another option to holding down your Sentro. You can also screw your Sentro down to a tabletop if you'd like to do that too. With Addi, you get what's called these Addi stoppers. These go onto your machine if you want to make a panel smaller than the full-size panel on the machine. Now, some of the little added things that you might want to have when you're using your machines, I've got some things over here. One of the things that you might want to have, it's not this one, it'd be this one over here. Sometimes the counters may not work as well. I have not had this issue, but I've seen some reviews on YouTube and some bloggers that say, particularly on the Sentro, that the counter can stop working. So you might want to get one of these digital row counters that you can just slip onto your hand. You can put it onto your non-cranking hand, or you can just leave it on the table next to it, and then you just tap it every time the black needle, or in this case the white needle, comes around. You can just tap it and it counts your rows. It's very important to count your rows, especially when you're doing like a match set, like mittens or slippers, or if you're doing your hats. You want to make sure that you have the right row count so that you have the right size hat. Another thing that you'll need is obviously scissors to cut your yarn. A helpful tool when you're using a knitting machine is a loom pick. It looks kind of like a crochet hook, but it has this hook on the end. You can see that hook on the end? And that helps get your stitches, especially if a machine drops a stitch, it'll help you get that stitch. It'll help you untension the yarn when you're getting it off the machine and be able to pick and get your stitch so that you can correct that stitch. And a crochet hook. Now I've got a couple of different kinds here. I've got some long wood crochet hooks. I've got a metal crochet hook. And I've got an ergonomic clover crochet hook. It doesn't matter what kind of crochet hook you have, and it doesn't really matter what size, as long as you can hook the yarn that you're using, it works. This is only for like when you drop a stitch, or if you want to crochet the edge of your project. Then if you're crocheting the edge of your project after you've taken it off your machine, obviously you're going to want a hook that is the right size for your yarn that you're using. Another helpful thing to have is some stitch markers. Now I've got a whole case here full of these little stitch markers. Just little stitch markers. You can see that in the, there are these little locking stitch markers. You don't have to have locking stitch markers. They are helpful though, because if you drop a stitch, you see where that stitch is, you can put one of these little stitch markers on it, because when you fix the stitch, it has to be to the left of the yarn feeder when you're going in to fix the stitch. And one of the things that I also find helpful is to have these little binder clips, because you clip these on to your work as you're working, and it adds weight until your work gets down to the table. Then you can start rolling it up, and then you might not need to add the clips on for the weight, because the weight of the project itself will help keep it onto the machine. So those are some of the little extra things that you might want to have on hand when you are first starting working your knitting machine. Now my thoughts on each of these machines, which one I like better, which one, things that I don't like about them, things that I do like about them. So the price point of the Sentro is about $60 to $70, which is very, very affordable. It's very economical. I think that is a great price point, especially if you are just starting to get into circular knitting. It's not a replacement for hand knitting, definitely not, but this is just like another aspect of working with yarn. And this is a great thing to just, if you're just testing out the waters and you're not sure if you're going to like circular knitting, this is a great machine to start with. Some people really love this machine, and this is the only machine they use. They don't like the Addi, and that's good too. Everybody has their preferences. Let me get through my notes here. Pardon me. And with the right yarn, this machine is not, some people say it's very finicky, but with the right yarn, it works like a dream. It's good for people who are looking to make projects just for family and friends. It's good for people who are doing charity knitting and charity knitting and crocheting. It's just knits, because you can bulk out a whole bunch of hats and scarves rather quickly with this machine. If you are looking to do stuff like markets, you might want to consider getting an Addi, simply because I don't know if this machine would hold up for a full market season. Because it's not as heavy duty or professional as the Addi. The Addi is more professional. However, the Addi is more expensive. This machine runs about $300, and that may not be in your budget to purchase a machine that's $300. And that's okay. That's understandable. Then you can go for the Sentro, which is about $60 to $70. Now, most of the patterns that you can find either on YouTube, there's lots of YouTube tutorials, and there's also patterns that you can purchase like on Etsy. Most designers, either in their tutorial or in their pattern, give you the counts for the Sentro, since it's a 48 pin, and they also give you the counts for the Addi, which is a 46 pin. So they give you counts for either machine, so it doesn't matter whether you have an Addi or a Sentro. But when you are looking to purchase a pattern, make sure you do check that in the description box, just in case. If you have the Sentro, make sure in the description box when you're looking at a pattern to purchase that it does say that it's got directions for the Sentro 48 or a 48 pin circular knitting machine. If you are looking for you have an Addi, you make sure it says it's got directions for the 46 pin circular knitting machine, because there are also 40 pin machines, there are 20 pin machines, or 22 pin machines. Addi makes believe it's a 22 pin machine. It's the smaller Addi Express machine. In fact, I've got one of those on order. I'm waiting for it to come in. Let's see, what are the other things here? Hey, these would be either one of these machines would be great for somebody who is got trouble with manual dexterity and they can't knit or crochet anymore. All you have to do is turn the crank. So it's great for someone who has arthritis but still wants to work with yarn. You can use one of these machines. These machines, there are patterns, there's patterns on YouTube, there's patterns on Etsy. You can make hats, scarves, mittens, slippers, toys. People have made sweaters and cardigans. You can make lots of different things with these machines. They're also good for people who are into dyeing their own yarn, and for indie dyers. You can swatch up your yarn to show people how it knits up. These are really great for that. You can make a swatch real nice and quick, or you can make a small project like a hat, just to show people what your yarn looks like when it's all knitted up. And most indie dyers just don't have enough time to sit and knit a swatch or knit a project to show for display for their yarn. These work really great. Or if you do dyeing of blanks, you can take your bare yarn and make a nice swatch out of it and then dye it. So these work really great for that. If you are not into making projects for marketplaces out of your yarn, you might want to just invest in the Sentro, and because of the price point, because it works just as well, but that's completely up to you. This is also a great family project. If you are doing charity knitting, you can get the whole family into using one of these. These are really easy. Kids can use them. Adults can use them. You can get your husbands into using them, or if you're a guy, you can get your wife into using them. Doesn't mean that these are just only for women to use. Men can use them too. They're really great. I just think they're a really good whole family project. You can get the kids into helping you make hats for charity. It can be a nice like family, instead of having a family game night, you can do a family hat night and make hats. So it's a really great another way to work with yarn. Now my preference in using these machines is the Addi. And the reason my preference is for the Addi, I just find, for me, I find it easier to cast on and cast off with the Addi. I just find the Addi easier overall to use. I think you have to do a little more tweaking with the Sentro than you have to do with the Addi. But one of the things I have found with just my first beginning projects, because like I said, the only thing I've really made is hats, is that the casting on is you need to go nice and slow when you're casting on. And there's plenty of tutorials on YouTube on how to cast on. Once I feel more comfortable with these machines, I can make some tutorials too, but right now I'm a newbie. I'm a beginner on this, and there's plenty of people out there that make really great tutorials too. So I think I would probably fumble on camera trying to show you how to cast on. There are plenty of other people out there that are great showing you how to do this. All you got to do is put in a search on YouTube for either Sentro Knitting Machine or Addi Knitting Machine, and you'll find tons of patterns, tons of cast-ons, lots of different ways, like if you have problems, how to fix your stitches and stuff like that. But for me personally, I like the Addi better because I find it easier to cast on with, cast off with. I find it easier to work. I think the crank itself, it's got this round handle, which I find with my arthritis, this is an easier handle for me to crank with. I find it goes nice. It's just the handle itself fits better in my hand. I get less fatigue using this versus using the Sentro. the Sentro handle. But that's just my preference. It doesn't mean there's anything good or bad about the machine. This has got more, it's got a little knob that you turn. Let's see if I can put this up a little higher. So it doesn't mean that you know, it's just my opinion on what I find easier. Somebody else might find this machine easier to turn with their hands, and they might find that this one gives you less hand fatigue than the other one. So it's really personal preference. And like I said, this one is a $300 machine. This is a $60, $70 machine. So, I mean, if your budget isn't for $300, then definitely go for the Sentro, because that'll fit your budget. Like I said, they both have the yarn, they both have the row counters. Addi does have the clamps, which I find nice, but like I said, there are plenty of workarounds to secure your Sentro. Securing it makes it much easier to use. If it's not secure and it's moving around, that does make it more difficult to use, but once you can secure this machine, it works just fine. Some of the other things I have on here. I'm trying to see. Just want to make sure I don't miss any information I wanted to give you. I think I've covered everything that I have written down here. So I hope you like this review. I will put links in the description box for the Sentro and for the Addi. I got them both on Amazon. I will also put a link for some of these accessories that I got, like the counter and the, sorry about the noise, the loom pick. You can get those also on Amazon. And I will also put a link for these stitch markers. Now, there are fancy ones, more expensive ones you can get that are made by Clover, but you can also go on Amazon and you can get these slightly smaller ones, and you can get like a package of 100 of them. They're fairly cheap. So I will put links for all of that in the description box. And I hope you enjoyed this. And thanks for watching, and happy crocheting or happy knitting. Bye-bye.